Fresh up our summer in the Hamptons, and one of the last things we do before we say goodbye to the most beautiful place to spend a summer is we stop by the farmers market, where we're able to get in September the first bushels of apples that have been harvested. And what we did was we picked up two different types of apples, one sweet and one very tart. So one of the green apples and one of the red apples, and we are going to make our famous apple pie. One of our favorite things that we use here in the kitchen is our apple corer, which we picked up several years ago at Williams-Sonoma, and we are going to use that to make the easiest apple pie you probably will ever make, because this tool does all the work for you. So what we do is we take the apple first and you put it into the prongs here, which are set up all the way at the very end, and you push it through. And then the brilliance of this is that it does the rest for you. As you can see, not only does it core your apple, but it peels it and it slices it. By the time you're done, you get the most uniform slices of apples to make the perfect apple pie, and then you also have a lot of fun along the way using this amazing apple coring machine. So it would have taken us 30 minutes to do, and a lot of imperfectly formed apples. It took us about just 3 or 4 minutes to core 8 apples for our famous apple pie. And what I do is once we have the apples cored, I put a little bit of gluten-free flour and also some fresh lemon juice on top of the apples, and I toss them in along with a little bit of cinnamon. So we have some extra flavor, just a dash, and you mix that all together in the bowl and you have your apples ready. And we can now move on to making our homemade caramel apple pie sauce. So now we're on to the caramel sauce for our famous caramel apple pie. And we're using one of my favorite things to use in my kitchen, which is my Dutch oven, which is by Staub. I picked this up at Williams-Sonoma a while back, and it's all cast iron. And we're going to use this to make the caramel sauce. The reason why we need to use this particular pot is when you are making caramel sauce, you need something with a really, really heavy bottom so that your caramel sauce does not burn. So we are going to take 6 tablespoons of butter. I like to use the sweet cream butter, and I actually don't mind using salted butter. I know that a lot of bakers will say that you have to use unsalted butter for baking, but I like a little bit extra kick of salt. I think it's a nice contrast to the sweetness of the caramel. And over low heat, we are going to melt the butter. After a couple of minutes, my butter is melted and looking incredibly beautiful, and I put in about a cup of sugar. I like to use the raw sugar, but you can actually do any combination that you like to for a fresh caramel sauce. I know some people like to do white sugar, brown sugar, but I do 1 cup of raw sugar that I get from the organic market. And you just pour all of that in there. And with a spatula, you combine the butter and the sugar together. And then you add in, once everything is stirred together, you add in about a 1/4 cup of water. And then over a medium heat, you constantly stir. This is not something that you can leave on the oven without tending to. After just a few minutes, we cranked up the heat to about medium-low. And now that it's starting to bubble, we are now going to put this on low. We have this incredibly gorgeous, beautifully colored, fresh caramel. So now we're on to making our pie crust, which, because I'm a savory person, is actually one of my favorite parts of eating pie. And as you can hear, we've just preheated our oven to 425 degrees because we are going to have ourselves an apple pie in the next few minutes. What I did here was I have all the ingredients for the pie crust, which you are going to find on Galavante, but I added a little twist. I do a gluten-free apple pie, and because it's gluten-free, it's a little different than making a pie with regular flour. The crust is usually a lot more crumbly and a little bit harder to handle, so we're going to show you some tips that we use used to shortcut a little bit so our pie actually looks pretty by the time all is said and done. So I've mixed together all of the ingredients for the apple pie, and I've frozen some butter, which I'm putting in. There is about 1 stick of butter, which is about half a cup that we put in. And then what I do is I take a pastry cutter, which I have right here, and I create this crumbly crust. We have worked our dough, and all of this butter is integrated into the gluten-free flour mixture. And it's time now to put in 4 tablespoons or teaspoons of white vinegar, as well as this egg that we just beat. And we combine this all together, and this is what's really going to make our dough. Something that was once just flour is now starting to resemble something that we're actually going to be able to roll out. Sometimes you need a little bit of help from some water to make it a little moister. So you add it by the tablespoon. As you can see, it really wasn't that hard to make the pie crust, which has now come together, and we're able to form it into this ball that we're going to pop into the refrigerator for about an hour or so, or any time from a half hour to an hour. Our dough, after about 30 minutes, is just about ready after being in the refrigerator. And because this is gluten-free, I mentioned I was going to give you a couple of tricks. We've rolled out our dough for the base of our pie, but really the trick is making this beautiful lattice look nice, so not only does our pie taste incredible, it also looks pretty too. So what I do is I take a portion of the dough, and to create that beautiful top of the pie that's crisscrossed, I pat it down, and I'm not using a roller for any of this, until it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, being really gentle with the dough. And I take my pastry cutter, and there you go. I now have the top of my apple pie. And I repeat this about 12 times, so I have enough pie crust on top, but always taking the dough that I use that are the scraps to create the next pieces. After very carefully rolling out our lattice pie crust for the top of our apple pie, we're going to put the finishing touch by taking the caramel apple sauce that we have and pouring the rest of this caramel right on top. So as the pie bakes, the entire pie is going to caramelize and have this taste of the homemade caramel. And this is going to go in the oven for about 45 minutes to an hour. We've had it preheating at 425. 45 minutes later, and about 10 minutes for the pie to cool, we now have our caramel apple pie. So while it's now fall and we are back to school and back to work here in New York City, we have some great memories of the Hamptons, and then of course some of our apples from the first apple pickings of the season.